Okay, so you're all very welcome to week 6 of the Not About Being Good course. Nice to have you all back. Um, it's mad that we've been together for about 7 weeks now because we had the week gap as well. And tonight the course draws to a close. So I'll just share what we're going to do tonight. So let me just share that on PowerPoint. Give me 1 second. Get my pointer set up. So what we're going to do tonight then is we're going to have the usual review of the home practice and what we covered last week. We're going to look this week a bit more at connecting with the Buddha and living a beautiful life. So after looking at the ethical precepts for a few weeks, and remorse and so on, I think it would be good to finish out week 6 with a really positive vision of why we practice, rather than always focusing on where we failed or how we fall short and so on. So we're going to look at the positive vision of the Buddhist life this week. After the break, we'll look at moving beyond self-clinging. So in a way, even moving beyond ethics, moving beyond anything rooted in a self. So that gets a bit out there, it must be said. So just to warn you in advance. And that involves looking at karma and dharma niyama. So if you remember those from week 1, if you don't, I'll do a little bit of a recap anyway about that. And included in there will be like some reflections as well. We'll do at least 2 reflections on the Buddha. And then we'll also look at tonight, what will you do next? Or what do you want to do next after the course? Okay. And then to remind you of what we did last week. Well, obviously we started off with a review of the previous week. We looked really at falling short in our practice of the precepts. So what happens when we fall short? We had looked at these 5 precepts, we'd looked at these 10 precepts, and we'd looked at how do we work when we fall short. So a large part of that was looking at this positive state of mind, which is painful but positive, called remorse, and trying not to do this other state of mind, which is painful and negative, which is guilt. And we spent a good bit of time looking at the difference between remorse and guilt last time. We looked at making amends, making resolutions, apologizing as necessary. So making amends might be putting things right that we've got wrong, that we've made wrong. Making resolutions would be kind of, okay, I'm not going to allow that situation to arise in that way again, and even apologizing if we need to. We touched into confession a little bit, and we talked a bit more then about forgiveness. And I was encouraging you then at the end to connect with the Buddha in all this, and we did a lovely reflection, I thought, which was looking at the Buddha, the figure of the Buddha, and getting back in touch again with the positives, because when we are working with this stuff, it's important to stay really in touch with the positives. And then we looked at home practice for the coming week, the week just gone actually now, and questions and so on. So just to remind you that the different species of shame, the positive, remorse, let's use the word remorse, the first was hri, which is our own internal conscience, you could say, and wishing we could have done better, feeling like we've fallen short of what we aspire to and wishing we could have done better. And then apatrapya is respect for wise opinion. So feeling like we wouldn't want to let ourselves down around people we admire, you could say. And then in terms of the home practice this past week, well, I asked you to read chapter 6, which was on all this stuff around, what to do when we fall short and so on. And I was asking you then to keep looking at your practice of the precepts. I mean, this is something that we want you to do for the rest of your life, really. Keep looking at your practice of the precepts. And reflect upon what to do when you fall short or when you let yourself down. So what tends to happen when you snap at your kid or your coworker, or you start shouting in the car at someone who's driven recklessly beside you, and you realize you've broken one of the precepts or you've fallen short in your practice of the precepts. Do you do unhelpful guilt, or do you do helpful remorse, hri and apatrapya? And then apologize if necessary, forgive if you can. And I was also encouraging you to stay in touch with the positive, the positivity reflected and represented by the Buddha. So that was the home practice for the week. And also, as always, you might have wanted to record all these in your notebook, and you might have also decided to keep all of these, keep a record of all these in your notebook as well. So and the gratitude journal as well. Sorry, is what I meant to say. So the gratitude journal and keeping a note of how you get on in all this. Yeah. Okay. So what we'll do now is why don't we just do a short meditation to arrive and to become more grounded? So why don't we just set ourselves up for meditation? Why don't we set ourselves upright? Sorry, I muted my microphone there. Why don't we set ourselves upright and just in a way that's comfortable, and we'll sit for about 5 or 6 minutes. Okay, so just settling in, taking in the sounds we can hear, closing your eyes if you haven't done so already. Having a sense of the room around us, the people, the sounds. Just allowing everything in, allowing your awareness to be open to whatever is going on in and around your experience, in and around you seated here. Tuning into the body a bit more, noticing the contact with the chair, with the cushions, with the floor. Feeling the feet and the legs as best we can. The hips, the pelvis, the sitting bones. Our back, our spine, muscles around the spine. The arms, the hands, the shoulders. Becoming aware of our face, our jaw, our ears, our scalp. Becoming aware of our stomach and abdomen. Our chest and rib cage. And tuning into the breath then. And with each in-breath, drawing in energy maybe from the floor, from the earth underneath us. With each out-breath, just letting go that bit more back into the earth, back into the support of the chair, the cushions. And then for the last few moments, just letting go of the breath and just sitting here. Not needing to do anything else, but just sit. And when you're ready, then starting to broaden out your awareness to take in the room around you, listening to the sounds you can hear. Becoming aware of the room you're in. And bringing the practice in your own time then to a close. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll go into small groups and we will have a chance now to discuss how we got on during the week with the home practice. So as always with these groups, we'll try and get you into groups of 4 roughly, but maybe if one person could take charge at the time, and the group will have a 12-minute countdown, so you'll see in the top corner how much time you have left. But Stephen will send out messages every 3 minutes or so as well to remind you 3 minutes gone. So with 4 people, you'll want 3 minutes each just to talk about how you get on with the home practice, how you get on with ethics, with the precepts, with Hri and Apatrapya and so on. So Stephen, are you ready to go? Okay, so if you can send people into the groups, that would be great. Or invite people to the groups, rather. You should see something come up now on your screen as usual. We'll see you in a few minutes. Oh, sorry, I have my microphone muted again. So you're all very welcome. People are starting to come back in from the groups. Is everyone back now, Stephen? Yep, great. Okay, so you're all very welcome back from the groups. So it would be great to hear how you got on in the groups, or any questions or comments you got on with the home practice during the week. I'd be particularly curious about, was it a relief to not have to do guilt anymore? That would be something I'd be quite curious about, if that was something you could do. And or any other comments from your week. So we'll give it a minute or two now just for people to painfully type meaningful statements on an iPhone screen. Or on your computer if you want, or any questions that you might have as well. And welcome as well to, we just had a few late people come in there, so welcome if you've just come late. Yep. Welcome to Miriam and Sandra and Kathy, I think. The people with the computer keyboards who always have the most in-depth analysis of how they get on during their week. Great. So Barry says to thank the lovely guys for the chat. Very inspirational. And Sam says, very compassionate space held by Helena, Valerie, and Olivia. Seemed to be a recurring theme of overcoming guilt and acknowledging the good that each person did do. That's great. That's really good to hear. So I take it there was a measure of success there in that, which sounds really good. In a way, like, the more we look at this stuff, the more you see just how much people are ruled by guilt at times, or a lot of the time, or indeed all the time. And it's just a useless emotion. And I really, really mean that it is a useless emotion. Yeah. And, you know, if you think it's fine for everyone else not to do guilt, but you have to do guilt, you could ask the question, well, what makes you so special? You know? It's a kind of a reverse egotism in some ways, feeling that you should be punished more than others, which people do hold on to, actually. I'm just waiting for a few more comments to come in. I can see people typing away. I know many of you are on the retreat as well during the week, so it's great I really enjoyed that as well. I hope you did. I hear they're all coming in now. Lara is saying, really great to hear where others are at too. We're all on our journeys and we really enjoyed meeting up with Mairead and Barry. That's great. Helena, I was on the retreat, so I need to catch up on the whole guilt versus remorse aspect. That's fine, Helena. You can go back and watch the videos again. It's a good excuse for missing last week to be on the retreat. Don't worry. It's completely acceptable. And then Miriam saying, absolutely not saying sorry anymore. The retreat was good. I mean, you can say sorry, but not out of guilt, you know, or not apologizing just out of habit for existing, you know. And Amy was saying, great relief for us to differentiate guilt from remorse. Remorse helping us move towards other people and away from self. Thanks for the wonderful course, extremely transformative. Thanks, Amy, that's lovely to hear. Mairead said that she had a lovely experience in the group with Barry, Paul, and Lara. That's great. Okay, so you can you can send in more questions if you want, or comments. Let's see, what time are we now? Yeah, let's move on a little bit anyway. So, oh, there's another one. Sorry, Julianne. I found it a very liberating idea to think that I don't have to do guilt anymore. However, putting that into practice and stopping a long time habit will take work. Willing to do that work though. That's great. I mean, it's hard work practicing Buddhism. It is hard work practicing Buddhist ethics, but it's even harder not doing it. Yeah, it's even harder not doing it because, you know, life, like if you brush up against life, Buddhism really, to a large degree, a huge degree of it involves learning how to live in tune with how things are, learning how to live in tune with life, so there's less painful tension and friction, you know. And Julianne, what you're saying there about, you know, it's great to know the idea of it. In a way, the basics of Buddhism are quite simple, actually. You've heard most of them now. You know, you've heard enough to get enlightened now. Sangharakshita has a saying that most of the spiritual life is finding emotional equivalence to our intellectual understandings. So the large part of the spiritual life is finding emotional equivalence to our intellectual understandings. So we can understand intellectually that it's better not to do guilt and it's better to cultivate remorse. But making your heart do that is the work of the spiritual life. You know what I mean? So that, I think it's a very helpful way of looking at it, that, yeah, we will clarify the ideas, but it will take time to bring that down into how we actually act. Yeah. Kathy loved the idea of remorse being positive and guilt making everyone feel, and she also mentions that guilt makes everyone feel so bad. Yeah, very true, Kathy. Yeah. Okay, good. So this week, as I said, we're going to focus on connecting with the Buddha. Yeah, and I don't have any notes for this because it's quite kind of open form, but in terms of the slideshow. But as I said, on more than one occasion in the past, the Buddha represents the perfect ethical life, you could say. He represents someone who's completely free of negative qualities. And he represents the fact that it is possible for anyone to gain those qualities themselves, like anyone to get to that similar kind of state themselves. And in his time, certainly, there seems to be many, many women and men who gained enlightenment as well. Yeah. And, you know, so I don't see any reason why. It might seem crazy and so far-fetched that you could exist in a state free of any kind of negativity and just with an unending well of positivity. But that is possible. That's what the Buddha is saying. And when we have the Buddha on our shrine, for example, I don't have a huge shrine here, but I have a female figure here behind me, for example, White Tara, who's an enlightened figure as well, an archetypal figure, it said. She represents, or the Buddha represents, the fact that basically they're you could say, at the end of your spiritual career. They're you in your deepest potential. So the Buddha on the shrine, next time you walk into a Buddha center, you see a Buddha, remember that's you in what you can achieve. And that's one of the reasons why we have shrines, is to remind you that it is possible to live in a deeply ethical and meaningful way. Yeah. So, I mean, one way of reflecting on the Buddha, and I think it's really good to reflect upon the Buddha. Kelly, I'll come back to your question in a moment. One way to reflect upon the Buddha is to ask the questions like, what would it be like to feel complete equanimity all the time? That's what a Buddha would feel. Yeah. So imagine you at your most equanimous, and imagine you at your absolute best, and the Buddha would experience that and more all the time without interruption. Yeah. What would it be like, for example, to never be thrown off balance or never to be stressed about anything? Yeah. And still actually be very effective in the world. Yeah. What would it be like to be able to respond with complete loving kindness to someone, free of any kind of sticky self-obsession? Yeah. So that's what the Buddha experiences. So it's a very traditional practice in Buddhism to bring the Buddha to mind, because he reminds us, and or she, if you reflect upon the female figures or whatever other figures there are. There's lots of different figures in Buddhism that are enlightened figures you can reflect upon. But to keep it simple, let's focus on the Buddha, the historical figure. But like, what would it be like to it's a very traditional practice to bring that to mind, because when we reflect upon that, we get a bit of a flavor of what it would be like ourselves, not just intellectually, but also emotionally. And we're going to do two more reflections on the Buddha tonight, which will hopefully give us a flavor of that. And the Buddha represents a kind of a positive goal. So if you talk, we've been talking about the precepts, we've been talking about remorse, we've been talking about guilt and stuff like that. And even the positives like remorse, that can't be all of the spiritual life. You have to have something positive drawing you on, rather than the vision of what you're trying to move away from, you could say. I remember a friend, my meditation teacher, the guy I learned with years ago, saying that, it's not enough if you're driving a car to somewhere, you're not just reversing it away from somewhere, you're driving it to somewhere. So the Buddha represents where we're driving to. We can't just be reversing away from something else. Yeah. So it's very important to have some kind of connection with the Buddha in whatever way, or enlightenment, you could say. But I think we relate to enlightenment much more easily when we see it embodied in a figure or a person generally. So enlightenment is a state of constant creativity. And I think it's chapter, let's see, which chapter is it? I think it's chapter 3, where or maybe it's 2, I can't quite remember, where it's, I'll tell you now, where the Buddha, where Subhadramati talks about lots of stories about how the Buddha lived, I think it's chapter 3. There's the story of Kisagotami, if you've read that story, of the woman whose child had died. There's the story of the monk who was suffering from dysentery, and all those stories. So it's a state of kind of the Buddha responding like that. So the ethical life is an art form rather than a tick list of what you should and shouldn't do, or thou shalts and thou shalt nots, So you really want to have a positive sense of and a vision of things, yeah. So we're going to do a reflection on the Buddha. And I will come back to your question then after that, Kelly, so because it'll link into that. So if you have any comments on it, obviously send them in the chat. But why don't we just set ourselves up again for about between 5 and 10 minutes, and we'll do a short reflection on the Buddha to connect us with the positive. So sitting upright, settling into your posture, letting go into your cushions. So letting your weight drop down into the floor, into the chair, into the cushions, sitting comfortably but upright. And tuning into the breath in the body. The breath in the chest, in the stomach, in the throat. Just following the natural flow of the breath. And now imagine that you are sitting in the presence of the Buddha, who is also sitting still and meditating like you are. You could imagine him in front of you or beside you, or whatever way is comfortable. Just as you are breathing, the Buddha is here breathing with you. The Buddha thought and practiced being mindful of the breath, the mindfulness of breathing. He used it on the night of his enlightenment. And just allowing your sense of the presence of the Buddha to steady, to deepen, breathing with the Buddha, breathing in the presence of the Buddha. Being open to the deep, positive, kind presence of the Buddha. The Buddha, who was the historical person who set Buddhism in motion, and because of whom we're here. The Buddha, which represents your own potential, you in your fullest. And now relaxing your imaginative efforts and just sitting for a few moments, letting go of all attempts to do anything, but just sit here. seeing how you're feeling right now. And when you're ready, then bringing the practice to a close, broadening out your attention once more, reintroducing movement. Okay, so maybe you had a very vivid experience of the Buddha there sitting with you. Maybe you were just too tired to do anything. Maybe somewhere in between. So hopefully you had a sense of something of the Buddha there, something of your potential, something of what's possible, something of the historical person who kicked it all off. Excuse me. Just to answer Kelly's question, so she asks about the chanting about the precepts I mentioned last week. So I can't remember what I said exactly, Kelly, but most Buddhists, we certainly do here in the Buddhist community we live in. Like this morning, I was meditating with one of the guys, and we chanted what's called the refuges and precepts together. And that's in a Buddhist language called Pali, which is quite close to what the Buddha would have spoken. We don't. I think the language that he did actually speak has died out. But what we chant is, I go for refuge to the Buddha, I go for refuge to the Dharma, his teaching, I go for refuge to the Sangha, the spiritual community. Go for refuge is a technical term. It really means, you place your heart upon, you orientate your life around. And after you do that 3 times, because doing something 3 times is traditionally significant in Buddhism. And then afterwards we chant the 5 or the 10 precepts, both the negative form and the positive form. I abstain from this, I abstain from that, I practice this, I practice that. So we chant them every day in the center. If you go to the morning meditation as well, usually that's put in there. And I'll send you a PDF of them with the notes tonight or tomorrow morning when I send that out as well, if you want to have a look, okay? Okay, so hopefully you found that reflection positive or useful. So Sam has asked a good question. Is there a typical meditation practice amongst order members? For how long do you aim to do it per day, or what types? Yeah, so recollection of the Buddha is a very traditional practice, and we'll do a more formal, well, it's still a very informal, but perhaps a more formal version of it at the end, where we bring to mind the Buddha again. And when you get ordained, you typically take on the figure of a Buddha or Bodhisattva. A Bodhisattva is like a Buddha, really, you could say. I don't want to get too technical. And you would visualize them every day. And I guess the point of that is to kind of give you a context of positivity within which all the rest of your practice happens. So the context of Buddhist practice is enlightenment, is freedom. So the figure I took on, I had a connection with for various reasons, was a female figure called White Tara. So I don't know how clearly that's coming out. So she's said to be the quintessence of compassion, and her right hand is the generosity mudra, our figure, or hand gesture, and her left hand here, that's probably reversed on your screen, is the fearlessness mudra, and she's said to bestow wisdom upon. She's like an incredibly beautiful embodiment of wisdom and enlightenment. So different Buddhist order members would have different figures they would meditate on, but the Buddha would be a very common one, as in I think it's one of the most common ones to reflect upon. So even if you never reflected formally on the Buddhist figures, you could reflect upon, well, what would it be like to be completely free of my negative habits? In a way, all the Buddha represents, I mean, there's a historical context, but as well, but what the Buddha represents is freedom, basically, complete and utter freedom beyond what we'd normally call human, actually, So and when you reflect upon it, The more you can reflect upon what it would be like to be completely unperturbable, completely free, completely positive, the more profound you realize it is, actually. The more profound you realize it is. Okay, but often our experience isn't like that. So we do have a tendency to give ourselves a hard time, don't we? And quite a few people there resonating with not wanting to do guilt anymore. And I think when we look at the precepts, it can bring out the kind of, oh God, I'm such a bad person. You know what I mean? Or I fall short here, here, and here. Sangharakshita has an aphorism or a saying which I think is useful to read out here. He says, if your attempts to live a spiritual, sorry, if in your attempts to live a spiritual life you become more anxious, make yourself wretched, and insist on working yourself into a state of exhaustion, something clearly has gone wrong. Yeah. So if in your attempts to live a spiritual life you become anxious, make yourself wretched, and insist on working yourself into a state of exhaustion, something clearly has gone wrong. So if the spiritual life is making you miserable, then you need to do something about that. You know what I mean? The precepts, the Buddhist teachings should actually make you more free. Now you might end up having to work more with deeper stuff, but on the whole, it should make you more free. You know, and a great way of doing this is trying to open to beauty. So I've talked about beauty before. You know, whatever form beauty takes for you, be it in traditional forms of art or non-traditional forms of art, in friendship, in meditation, in nature, wherever you can access beauty. I think like one of the highest beauties is the beauty of the spiritual life, the beauty of spiritual friendships, the beauty of the kind of refined states of mind you can get into. They're very, very beautiful. But often we're not used to beauty and it goes against the grain. So there's the story of the fish basket, which I don't think I've told in this course. It's a story I tell in almost every course I do. So if you've heard this before, please forgive me. But I think it's a traditional Indian story. I'm not sure if it's even Buddhist, but it's the story of the way I've heard is that there's a woman who's a fishmonger and she comes into the village inland to sell her fish in a basket. She carries a basket and a fish. And at the end of the day, she sold all her fish. So she makes to go back to her village on the coast, but it's fallen dark. And it's too late to walk the dangerous roads at night in India. Bandits, tigers, all that kind of stuff. So she asks a friend, could she stay with her? And her friend says, no problems. Her friend is a florist, you know, a flower seller. And if you've ever been to India, you'll see them all over the place. So often it'll be a kind of in a little kind of opening of a shed, someone will be sitting there in lotus position, making garland after garland of flowers out of beautiful marigolds or something like this. And so they really value flowers like that in India. So the friend puts the fishmonger up in her shop, lays out a mattress on the ground in the flower shop, and the fishmonger lies down to sleep. And of course she can't sleep because the smell of the flowers is too strong for her. She's not used to it. So what she does is she gets her smelly fish basket and sticks it over her head. And then she falls soundly asleep and sleeps very happily for the night. Yeah. So I probably don't need to labor the metaphor there, but maybe I will just in case it's not clear. But we're used to a certain pong. You know what I mean? We like the comfort of our fish basket. And we will often rather have the fish basket over our head and not see things very clearly because it's familiar to us, than take it off and try and be open to this new experience of beautiful flowers that might feel a bit too much at times, or it might feel a bit too refined for us, or might not be comfortable for us. So I think the whole thing around guilt is very interesting because sometimes one of the reasons it's hard to let go of guilt is just because we rather the devil we know. You know, we're familiar with certain negative mental states. And we think that at some level, I'm not saying this is rational now, or I'm not saying this is even conscious, at some level we'll often rather put up with the familiar that's bad than the good that is a bit more uncertain and challenging. Yeah? So we have to try and get out of our fish basket, get out of our routines, get out of our thing. I think we can underestimate just how powerful a motivator familiarity is. We do things because they give us a certain comfort, particularly negative mental states. Yeah, it's the familiarity of them that's so seductive. If they weren't habits, well, they wouldn't be habits, would they? You know what I mean? It's a bit of a tautology there, but it's like if things weren't habitual, it wouldn't be a problem to let go of them. And part of the reason why they're habitual is that we're just very familiar with them, and we don't want to get let go of them as a result. So I hope that makes sense. That we definitely don't. It's difficult to step out of our usual habits. It's difficult to set out of what gives us a sense of security, even if that sense of security is a terrible one, And we don't want to stand out. We don't want to, we have a tall flower syndrome in Ireland. So, if you stand out, you'll get your head cut off, so to speak, metaphorically. We also fear the jealousy of others, that if we start to go beyond what people think of us, they might be jealous of us or they might hate us. But I think most fear of change and most fear of the familiar is probably internal, actually. But keep opening to beauty, keep practicing, keep bringing the Buddha to mind. I think if we can have a sense of what we're trying to let go into, the positivity of the Buddha, it's a lot more easy to let go of of what is familiar, of the negative stuff. So if you imagine an ice cube, if you imagine a spoon of sugar in warm water and a spoon of sugar in cold water, the warm water will dissolve it much more. So if we have that kind of warm, positive feeling for something more, it's much more easy than to let go of the tight, restricted self into that. It's much more easy for the tight, constricted self to dissolve into something warm and connected than it is for something cold and terrifying. Yeah. So this is why the Buddha is really important. He kind of can give us the confidence to let go into a bigger way of being. And if we don't have that, we'll get tight, we'll stay in the fish basket, we'll not want to let go. Okay, there's a lot there in that. I think that's, I'm not claiming I'm the author of this, so I can happily say that I think that's quite profound as a teaching. And it's one that I have to keep reminding myself of as well. So just be wary of missed opportunities to let go a bit more. Be wary of missed opportunities for generosity and so on, because that's when we're generous, when we're kind, when we're truthful, when we connect with people, we let go of that tightness a bit more into something more. Yeah. Okay. I think that's all I'm going to say for the first half. You've probably received enough there for now. If you have any questions, do write them in. I'm very happy to discuss that more. It's I think it's one of the areas that really gets my Buddhist juices going in terms of like, letting go. How does one let go into something more, into a greater sense of oneself? What we'll do is, Sam's just asking, interesting to hear about how about regular meditation lengths? Yeah, that's fine. So if you want to just in terms of bringing the Buddha to mind, I mean, like, and then I'll answer your question, Sam. I think you could bring the Buddha to mind, like, whenever you want, really. I mean, it's quite traditional in Buddhist meditation practice to bring your teacher to mind, or your guru if you're in a traditional school, or or the Buddha to mind. Last week we were looking at a great Tibetan figure called Milarepa, who's a great Tibetan teacher. At the start of all his kind of teachings and all his meditations, he would bring his teacher to mind, imagine him in the sky above himself, sitting on a lotus, kind of giving him teachings. So you may or may not want, certainly don't do that with me, but you may want to bring the Buddha to mind. You know what I mean? Bring to mind some kind of sense of what it's like to be free and what it's like to be deeply loving and deeply aware and so on. And you can do that at the start of your meditation. You could do it at the end of your meditation as well, if you want. You could even, like, if you found that really useful there, sitting with the Buddha breathing, like we were there, you could do it right throughout your mindfulness of breathing if you wanted. I mean, any technique that you use like that, or any visualization you use, will wear out. It won't be it'll become a bit stale after a while anyway. So just be prepared for that too. And then to answer Sam's question more directly about I think he means like the order members' reflections. Typically, like you'd be reflecting upon a figure like White Tara for 40 minutes, 50 minutes. Now, there would be quite a build-up of that. You start off in a clear blue sky, and then, Tara appears in various stages, and then there's usually a kind of a, for want of a better word, although it's probably quite a Christian word in some ways, a blessing that happens, a kind of a suffusing of energy, of positivity of you, and then you kind of bring that out into the world imaginatively as well. I don't want to say too much about it because It's very context specific for ordination, but usually they definitely have a period of connecting with the figure. Then at the end, the figure dissolving away again into blue sky. So yeah, I mean, don't worry about those practices if that just freaks you out. But it is good to connect with the Buddha in some form. Okay, so why don't we have a 5 minute break? So why don't we come back and be ready to go at 6 minutes past 8? And if you have any questions in the meantime, you can pop them in the chat box. So we'll see you back here in 5 minutes time. Okay. So just before we kick off, Sam was actually asking something else about meditation, the length of regular meditation sits. So I answered the wrong question, but in terms of people, so if you've done the meditation course, I know not all of you have done, you usually start off by doing 20-25 minutes of the mindfulness of breathing and the metta bhavana. I would work that up to 40-50 minutes each sit eventually. I tend to do 40-45 minutes a sit, but I often do more than one sit a day. Just to answer Sam's question, some people do longer, 50 minutes, an hour for each sit. It's up to the person here. Okay, I hope we're all back. So next thing just to talk about, let's see. So let me just share again the screen. Okay, so you can just, in terms of what to do next, I'll come on to that in a moment. I think I have it on the next page, yeah. What to do next. So there's a few courses coming up in the next wee while. I'm actually repeating this course, so if you know anyone who might like to do it, How to Live in the World on Fire, I'll be running it on Wednesday, the 19th of August for 6 weeks again, 7 to 9. Same as now, except on a Wednesday night for 5 weeks. If you like, obviously that doesn't, like, I doubt any of you want to do it again. I wouldn't recommend it necessarily. If you want to do an introduction to meditation and Buddhism course, so if you want to learn to meditate, if you want to know more generally about Buddhism, this is called a creative response to uncertain times, and it's on Saturday mornings from the Saturday the 29th of August, and that's for 5 weeks. I should have put that in there, for 5 weeks. And that's 10:30 until in the morning until 12:30 p.m. So if you want to do an intro to Buddhism and meditation course, you could do that. And then lastly, there's a Life with Full Attention course. So this is open to anyone as well. You don't have to have done meditation before, but it's exploring the full breadth of Buddhist mindfulness. So mindfulness isn't just about being aware of what's going on here and now. There's multi-levels of it, like for example the ethical vigilance we talked about a few weeks ago. So that's starting in September, Tuesday the 8th of September for 8 weeks. So it's an 8-week course. Nyanadara will be leading that, and so all those courses are online and all those courses are free. As we've done with this one. So if you want to do one of those, you might want to take note. I'll send you them all and the booking links in the email tonight or tomorrow morning anyway. And then don't forget that we have various drop-in events as well. So for example, we have morning and lunchtime meditation. So if you want to come along and meditate with people, 7:30 a.m. You want to be there a few minutes beforehand to 8:20 a.m. That's a good long 40-50 minute sit. And 1:15 p.m. to 1:45 p.m. That's a lunchtime sit for half an hour. So they're only on weekdays, those ones. And there's lots of other events as well here and there that you can look at. So I'll send you links for all of that in the email that I send out. And then, sorry, just to remind you as well that the course is done, our courses are completely free, but if you can give a donation for the course, if you've appreciated the course and want to help us, the more we're almost entirely dependent upon donations at the moment. Stephen and I don't get paid to do this, so we're very happy just to offer the Dharma. But if you want to give a donation, that would really help us. Stephen, maybe you could put the links in the chat if you haven't done so already. It would really help us to continue what we do. Yeah. Kathy's asking, do we offer any online meditations? Kathy, have I answered your question there about the meditation course? So if you want to do the meditation course, we don't really do any drop-in teaching classes. You'd really want to do the course itself to do that, yeah? Um, so that's a few events. I know there's another question or two there. I'll get back to them in a moment. What I'd like to ask you to do next then is uh, at the end of last week's class, and I forgot to mention it earlier, I'd like you to, at some point now, I don't know if you have the card. I don't know if you remember last week I asked you to have a card ready, like a card you can send to people. So what I'd like you to do is have that card now. We're going to spend a few minutes writing that card. If you don't have the card with you, maybe you could just grab a piece of paper and copy it onto the card later. So I'd like you to get a card you can put in an envelope. You can seal the envelope on, and we'll talk about in a few minutes what to do with that. But what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to pick three things that you want to send yourself in a card for 3 weeks' time. Yeah, 3 intentions for the course, 3 things you want to take away from the course. So 3 things you want to remind yourself about in 3 weeks' time. And so I'll give you a few minutes to write those down. It could be whatever 3 things you want to take away with you. It might be to remember not to do guilt. And make sure every day that you get in touch with some sense of beauty, for example. Bringing the Buddha to mind at the end of every meditation set. Something, whatever it is, practice the precepts. Be quite specific if you can be. Don't just say something like, be a better person. You know what I mean? I mean, obviously you want to be a better person, but that isn't much use in terms of forming particular intentions. So particular intentions you want to do, you want to remember going forward, and you're going to send it to yourself in 3 weeks' time. So I'll give you 3 or 4 minutes to do that right now. And I'm recording this, so if you're watching this on the YouTube video, you have to do it on the YouTube video as well. So maybe 1 more minute. So if we were on a regular course, I would collect those envelopes from you, yeah, an in-person course, and in 3 weeks' time, I'd send them out to you in the post. Yeah, and you'd have forgotten all about them. You might even have forgotten about any efforts to make an effort in ethics, or you might be doing it diligently every day. So I can't do that obviously now. What I'd suggest you try and do, if you can trust someone with this, is give them to one of your housemates, your family, or something like that, or a friend you trust, and put a stamp on it for them to make it as easy as possible, and write your address on it, and get them to post it to you in 3 weeks' time. If you don't think you can ask anyone to do that, just put a reminder put it somewhere safe, and put a reminder in your own phone to open it in 3 weeks' time. Yeah, put it in a time vault or something like that. So do something with it. If it's just a piece of paper, it might be worth putting it on a card tonight after the course, just so you know. So you have it. There's a bit more of a formality to it that it'll have more of an effect. Yeah. So hopefully that makes sense. If that's not clear, just type in the chat. Yeah. Then the last thing to mention, by the way, is that I just something I forgot there when I was talking about what to do next. I'll also send you a link to join our mailing list if you want. So if you're on the mailing list, you get all the updates about different things. If you're probably many of you are probably already on the mailing list, I know, but I'll send you out a link for that in the chat boxes in the follow-up notes as well. Okay, so if you have any more questions, so Olivia has a question. As a scientist yourself, have you any advice for the days when you slip into cynicism and logic, feeling unable to connect to the sense of beauty? Well, it's been a while since the days of my intensive science, I'm afraid, Olivia. I mean, these days I do notice it when I'm just on a computer all day long, you know, even if I'm doing goodly things on a computer here. I was on a seminar about this stuff on Saturday. There was a seminar for Buddhist teachers because so many people are online these days. And one of the things they were saying is that one of the things they were really emphasizing is every hour stopping and just tuning into your body and doing 3 minutes of tuning into your body and how you feel in your body. And make sure you do a body scan every day. So that was one of my kind of precepts or guidelines from the day, was maybe after every lunchtime to lie down in the bed and do a body scan. So, you know, the body scan you would have learned in your meditation practice. And I think it's a very difficult to get out of cynicism and logic and to connect with beauty if you're not in your body, if you see what I mean. So I think one of the first things we need to do, and this isn't just if you're a scientist, this is for many of us who are on our computers all day long in our bedrooms, you know, these days, who are working from home. Just do make sure you take breaks, make sure you connect with yourself, go out for a walk even if you don't want to. Usually you kind of want to stay in the fish basket, so going out for the walk is, you know, taking off the fish basket a bit. There's some very good there was some very good advice given by the Canadian government about points for working in the COVID crisis, which I think are worth reading out. So they say I'll read them out now if that's not too much of a diversion. They say you are not working from home. You are at home working during a crisis, trying to work. Okay, so you're trying to work during a crisis, basically. Your personal, mental, physical, and emotional health are far more important than anything else right now. Try not to compensate for lost productivity by working longer hours. You will be kind to yourself and not judging how you are coping based upon how you see others cope. I'm sorry. You will be kind to yourself and not judge how you are coping based upon how you see others coping. I'll send these out in the email as well. You will be kind to yourself and not judge how they are coping based upon how you are coping. So basically look at how other people are coping and base your actions on that. And your team's success will not be measured the same way as it were when things were normal. So I think the most useful one for me there is you're at home during a crisis trying to work. You're not working from home. And your physical, emotional, and mental well-being are far more important than anything else right now. So just a couple of things to drop in there, yeah. I'll just take a note to send those out. But I think Olivia, you just have to stop, you know, and just try and get out for a walk or break the patterns and get into your body. And I find that when I try and get into my body, it's painful usually. It's unpleasant. I don't want to go in there. You know what I mean? If I've been on my computer all day, but you have to kind of push through that membrane of unpleasantness into something deeper and richer. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to the next part then. So I have to talk a little bit more and then we'll do some more reflection. Yeah. So according to the Buddha, all of our difficulties and trouble and fear emerge from clinging to a separate sense of self from the world, putting up a barrier that tries to keep the world out and tries to keep us in, and keeps at bay that which threatens us, and keeps safe in here what we think of as us. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to let go of that tight boundary between ourselves and the world. And it's only through letting go of this sense of self the Buddha said that we can attain happiness. So it's a kind of a funny paradox of the spiritual life. Maybe not funny, haha, but it's kind of a strange, one of those strange paradoxes of the spiritual life, that what we're trying to do with the self is to let go of and go beyond the self. Yeah. If that's a bit abstract for you, you might just think that, I'm sure we've all had times where we're not really thinking about ourselves and we're just in something. We're in a flow, we're in a conversation, we're in an activity where we kind of forget about having to think about ourselves. And it's just very enjoyable and it's very pleasant and it's very beautiful. Yeah. It can happen a lot in communication. It can happen a lot when we're doing things with people we love. It can happen a lot when we're in nature, for example. So we've already had experiences where this tight knot of self loosens and we can just feel in flow with the world. Yeah. People talk about a feeling of oneness with the world around them. So we have experiences of that, and at times like that, it doesn't even feel like you are doing much. It's more just that you've kind of let go of you, and you're just going with things. We're going with a bigger, deeper sense of things. Yeah. So we've all, I'm sure, experienced that, and you might even ask yourself, whose will is operating here? Is it me? Is it the universe? Is what happening? So we need to let go of being really tightly self-preoccupied, because as soon as we tighten, we block out the world. We stop this flow, this interpenetration, you could say, this interdependence, as we call it sometimes in modern Buddhism. So we have to stop tightening. We have to stop tightening around the self. And the Buddha represents a complete letting go of self. Yeah, a complete letting go of self, which is vaster than anything we can probably bring to mind. The more I reflect upon the Buddha or Tara or whoever, whatever enlightened figure, the more I see just how vast that enlightenment must be and unknowable by the regular human mind it must be. It's very hard to explain even metta, you know what I mean, logically. And it's much more hard to explain what going beyond the self looks and feels like. But we have all had some kind of flavor of that, I trust. So it's a bit unfathomable. But we have all had those experiences. And when we're in those experiences, when we kind of let go, something else starts to emerge that isn't self, you could say. And that's what I want to talk about for the next while. Now, before I get into that, I mean, it's worth saying, that's okay, Daria, if you're still here, Daria has to leave. It's worth saying that, we have a very rational mind, and when we go at this too rationally and too literally, we'll destroy any chance of, experiencing it, Imagine you're just always analyzing how you're getting on in the mindfulness of breathing with the rational mind. You'll never have a rich experience of the mindfulness of breathing, It's good to have rational analysis, but it's good to be able to let it go as well. And I've just had so many interactions with people where something strange and mysterious and wonderful happens that, there's, as Shakespeare said, as Hamlet said, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, So he says that to Horatio, doesn't he? I think it is anyway. But anyways, it's when he's contemplating the death of his old the childhood jester. But there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophy, we could say, to adapt it slightly. So the mind is much more powerful and much more open and much more rich than we think it is. We limit it a lot because we want to keep it in its fish basket. So you might remember a teaching from way back on week 1, which I'll just remind us of now. Let me just scroll through these. So you might remember what I was saying about conditionality back in week 1. So these are levels at which the universe operates, and I want to focus on one we didn't talk about so much the last time. So I talked about how there's the physical level, physical inorganic. There's organic life, an organizing at an organic level like biology. The first one would be physics, you could say, and chemistry. The second one would be organic, although I know chemistry spans both a bit. The next one would be simple consciousness. So these are increasing levels of, you might say, complexity. The fourth level is the one we've been looking at for most of this course, which is the level of karma, the level of willed action, and how when we act in a certain kind of way, it has certain kind of outcomes. So we act out of hatred, greed, ill will. It tends to leave us in a world more cut off from others. We act out of generosity, kindness, compassion, empathy. It tends to lead us to be more connected with others. But then there's a level beyond that again, which is called so the fourth one is called the karma level, the karma niyama, and the fifth one is called the dharma niyama. Dharma means truth. So how human beings become Buddhas. And there is a kind of progression here. So most of the spiritual life is lived for us at the fourth level there, where we're trying to become more ethical. We're trying to, in a way, purify our actions in the sense of like letting go of any kind of negativity and so on. And if we do that, if we keep practicing more and more and more, something of the last level, the fifth level, starts to come more and more into play. So let me just go on to the next one. So when you go beyond self, so you practice ethics until you become really free of greed, hatred, delusion, and something else starts to manifest, which is not rooted in your normal everyday self, you could say. So a deeper creativity emerges, a deeper spontaneity, a deeper kind of beauty emerges. You could say it emerges from within you, from your higher self. You could say it comes from the Buddha. Whatever way you want to talk about it. In a way, any way you talk about it is incorrect from the Buddhist point of view. It's all kind of it's much more subtle than any words can be put to. Yeah, but I think most Westerners like to think of it as a kind of a higher form of self. If you're quite happy with talking about the Buddha, you could say it's the Buddha starting to manifest. Any language you use is limited, but something else which isn't rooted in self starts to emerge. Which isn't rooted in your everyday self starts to emerge. And that deeper sense of something emerging is a selfless desire to just help everyone, to be kind as possible, to be deeply wise, and to act for the benefit of all. So there is, if we could just kind of get the self out of the way, you could say, the everyday self, Buddhism says that the deepest reaches of the mind, the deepest powers of the mind want to act in a way to benefit all beings. So that's quite a powerful statement about the nature of mind, that if we can just get ourselves out of the way, something true and rich and kind of altruistic and positive will flow through us. But the problem is that we just kind of, a metaphor for it is like a stream, or an image is like a stream, so a mountain stream of beautiful, clear water. But we keep pouring in food dyes into it. But if we just stop pouring in these food dyes of greed, hatred, and delusion, and all their variants, eventually something pure will start to come through again. The water will purify itself. Our minds will purify themselves again. So I think Buddhism has a deeply positive, a deeply optimistic view of the mind, that we can continually improve the mind until we can let go of, yes, they are very deep-rooted patterns of greed, hatred, and delusion, but they can be let go of eventually. And in a way, this is what the Dharma Niyama is. This is what that fifth element is of like how human beings become Buddhas. That's what starts to operate when we can get ourselves out of the way. This aspect of us, which is the Dharma Niyama. It's very hard to pin this down, and we're talking very poetically here, but it's not rooted in a self. It's not rooted in a me here doing this. There's something else going on. One image I have, and one way, this is quite, it's taken me a while to get my head around this. The self, so Valerie, yeah, sometimes the self is called the ego, but we mean that in a kind of a loose way rather than the strict Freudian way, perhaps, It's kind of the everyday me. So it's the sense of I am here doing this, yeah? And the problem with doing that, it's useful. It's useful, I am not going to step outside in front of a bus, that's useful. But ultimately it limits us. Like when we decide that there's a self here and a not self out there, we kind of inhibit the flow of energy between ourselves and the world, speaking very poetically. And it causes us suffering, the Buddha said. So what we have to do is kind of refine the self until we can let go and into a completely altruistic sense of self. Now, let me tell you a story about a cow. Yeah, so a friend of mine had a mystical experience with a cow where he was on retreat and he was looking at a cow in a field and he entered into what it must be like to be a cow. And I don't know if he was like high or, well, he wasn't high probably because he was on retreat, but I don't know if he was like I don't know what kind of experience he was having, but he's quite a psychic fella at times. And he said it was just so slow and narrow, and not slow in a good way, and kind of reduced, you know? So if we go back to so human beings have self-awareness. Now imagine you went up to a cow and started trying to a cow in the field and started trying to explain to a cow what self-awareness is. So you'd say to it things like, hey cow, I know you don't have self-awareness. As far as we know, you don't have self-awareness. You know, all you have is this sense of stimulus response, you know, with very limited if any kind of higher thinking going on. So you're there trying to say to the cow, look, there's this whole level of consciousness which is self-awareness, and it's amazing, you know. Yeah, it causes some trouble sometimes, but on the whole it's really good. And you know, you can step back from your experience, you can think about it, you don't have to be always immediately in your experience, like just stimulus response like you guys are. And the cow might go, no, I don't believe you, I'm just going to keep eating my grass, you know. So in a similar kind of way, the Buddha is saying to us, hey human beings, there's this whole other way of being which isn't caught up in self, which isn't caught up in I want this, I don't want that, even if it's a reasonably good sense of self. You know, there's this other way of being which is completely free, it's completely loving, it's completely spontaneous, it's completely creative. All you have to do is take the fish basket off. All you have to do is let go of that security that you draw from self, and you will be much happier. Yeah. So hopefully the analogy spells it out. So a lot of the spiritual life is learning to let go of the self, learning to let go of our self preoccupation, and trusting that that deeper positivity will emerge then. Yeah. And so to sum up the spiritual life, so what we do in the spiritual life then is we become more skillful and we refine ourselves. And then we try and let go of the old self and become more and more truly human. And then we try and open up to something more than being just a good human being, something which is spontaneous and free from self, and letting go into that deeper flow of life or the universe or whatever it is that you can't easily put words on. And all of this, like I said in week one, all of this is very natural. It's just part of the human condition. It's part of having a consciousness. Just like apples fall from trees, actions have consequences, and humans can become Buddhas. Yeah. So it's just there's no God at work here from the Buddhist perspective. There's no and it's not annihilation either. So if you're worried about disappearing off into the void, well, you just think, well, in those moments of when you've had that spontaneity and creativity where you're not being so concerned with yourself, were you lost there or were you there? And you'd say that, well, I'm there in a very vivid and rich and real way, and it's nothing to be feared. Yeah. So it's not annihilation either. What it is annihilation of is just self-preoccupation that isn't helpful. Yeah. Okay, there's a lot said there. I don't fully understand it myself, but feel free to ask questions because the reason I say I don't understand it is because I'm not enlightened. If you didn't get that, there was a lot there, and it is tricky to get your head around. Subhadra Mati talks about it a lot in her book, so you can read more about it there. Kelly asks in the comments, practicing metta bhavana would be the best practice to let go of self, or are there others? I think practicing metta bhavana is a very powerful practice in letting go of self. Yeah. So in the first stage, you're trying to really come into a positive relationship with yourself so that you don't have to cling so tightly to self. Yeah. And in the other stages, the more you can open up and connect with other people, the less tightly polarized you'll be with them. The more, like when you bring to mind the good friend, you usually feel connection with them. When you bring to mind the neutral person, if you know the practice, you're trying to connect anyway, even if you don't have an emotional connection with them. And that still undermines our sense of self. And with the difficult person, well, the reason they're difficult, well, because they're difficult rather, we polarize with them. We keep them out there, and we keep ourselves in here. And what you're trying to do is overcome that polarization with them. So again, you're letting go of self there, So metta bhavana is a really powerful practice. There are other reflections like ones we've done in this course, like exchanging self and other. So you remember that practice we did where we put ourselves in someone else's shoes? That's a very powerful practice. That's a very traditional practice. Bringing the Buddha to mind is a very good practice of overcoming self, because he gives you the confidence to let go into something more. In a way, all Buddhist practice really is about letting go of self, you could say, or letting go of your tight self-preoccupation. And if you're freaking out at the moment about if you just don't want to let go because the flower shop's too intense, you can always just have your fish basket, take it off for a little bit, then put it back on again when you need to, and then just get a bit better at taking it off each time. That's in a way what we're doing with spiritual practice. Okay, so why don't we do another reflection? Because I've talked for too long, and I know I'll be leading the reflection, but I get sick of my own voice. So why don't we do another reflection now? So why don't we set ourselves up in meditation, or at least upright and alert, closing our eyes when we're ready, when we're comfortable to do so. And I'm going to lead us through a reflection on the Buddha. A bit more involved reflection on the Buddha. So sitting quietly, allowing our minds to become calm, letting everyday concerns or thoughts just drop away. And allowing everything to dissolve away into a vast expanse of blue sky. So it's not that we just imagine a blue sky, we think of everything around us dissolving away into a blue sky. We imagine that happening. The blue sky emerging out of everything around us. So we have a sense of clear, spacious blue sky in all directions. And now we see a flat, grassy plain appear in front of us. And we're seated on this flat, grassy plain, stretching off into the horizon. And in the far distance are snow-capped mountain peaks. And we sit on this expansive and spacious plain, the grass a vivid green. And near us, in front of us, sprouts a tree, a Bodhi tree, a tree of awakening. So it has a silver trunk, so it grows up from a sprout up to become a full-bodied tree, about the size of a large oak tree, but wider, not as tall, with wide-reaching branches that stretch over us, and heart-shaped dark green leaves. And we sit in the shelter of the tree, facing the trunk, perhaps 2 or 3 meters back from the trunk. And in front of the trunk is a mound of grass piled up to form a seat. Meditation seat. And on the seat is a pure white cloth, brilliant white. And seated on the white cloth is the Buddha, the historical Buddha, sitting cross-legged in meditation. He wears the saffron robes of a monk with one shoulder uncovered. If you want to bring to mind the image of the Buddha we looked at last week in looking like that, feeling free to do so. But the Buddha is there seated in front of us, in cross-legged meditation posture. His hands rest in his lap in the meditation posture, one on top of the other, and they support a black begging bowl. His hair is blue-black and curly. And he is smiling serenely, eyes half closed. He is delighted to see us, and we are welcomed with a sense of deep kindness from him. His figure is surrounded by an aura of golden light. And he gives off a feeling of profound peacefulness and an infinite compassion. An infinite kindness. The golden light around the Buddha extends out to gently surround us too. The light permeates us completely, purifying us of all shortcomings and all regrets. golden light fills us, and we feel our wisdom increase. Our intention to practice is strengthened. Our resolve made firm and unshakable. Slowly the Buddha dissolves into golden light. The golden light moves into our heart, deepening the golden aura around us. And we sit for a while, enjoying and absorbing the golden light of the Buddha. So just sitting with this for a few moments. And now letting go of the practice completely and just sitting for a few more moments. Tuning into how we're feeling. And when we're ready, then bringing the practice to a close, opening our eyes. Okay, I'm bringing the practice to a close then. Okay, so I was talking about, connecting with a deeper sense of, well, something beyond the self. So just to remind you that that could be seen as the Buddha out there, or your own higher consciousness, or whatever way you want to look at it. You could see that reflection as a way of connecting with the Buddha. You could see it as a way of connecting with your higher self. Don't worry about the theological plumbing, you could say. Just do it anyway. And either way of thinking about it is probably wrong anyway. The Buddha said either way of thinking about it, it's more subtle than any words can be put on, but there is something beyond the everyday self there. So hopefully you had a sense of that in that practice. So I think it's a lovely practice to bring the Buddha to mind in that way. Do feel free to put any comments or questions in the chat. Okay, so maybe what we could do now, Stephen, if you're ready to do the groups, we could do just a very quick group again. Literally just 5 minutes long. If this isn't too much right after doing a reflection like that, hopefully it's not too much of a blast. But maybe in the group, what you could do is take 1 minute each and say the main thing you want to take away from the course. Yeah, the main thing you want to take away from the course. And I think, you have your 3 things in your card, so it obviously will likely be related to that. But I think there's a power in just sharing it with the other people that makes it more likely to sink into your being a bit more. So we'll do the same groups as earlier, and I think a few people came late, Stephen, so you might want to put them in the other group. So can you send them to the groups? And you really have to be quite quick now because it's only going to be 5 minutes or so. Don't put a timer on it, Steve. We'll send a notification and bring them back in. Yeah. Okay, so whenever Stephen's ready, he'll send you the invite to go into the groups again. And when you come back, maybe you could type them then in the chat box. Here we go. We're all pouring back in now.
Yeah, that should be it.
Okay, good. And Stephen, will you make me the host then when you're ready? Okay, folks, it'd be great to, if you want to, actually what we're going to do is we're going to turn off the recording now.